In this video, we will be building a website using HTML and CSS. If you are new to building websites, then this video will be very helpful as you can follow along and see what I'm doing as I build this web page. So at the top, you can see that there is a list of links. This is a navigation menu. And in the center of the page, we have a heading and 2 paragraphs and a Buy Now button. And then there is a background image on the right side of the page, on the main body section of the page. And if we look now at the bottom of the page, we have a footer area with the black background. And we have 2 lists of links here that the user can click on. And then on the right side, we have a list of social navigation links. So let's get into this and start building this web page. So I've set up a folder and a template HTML file. And if I open up my directory here, you can also see that I've got some images already saved in the folder. And I also have a CSS file. On the bottom right side of the screen, you will see the JPEG that I have saved. So this is what we'll be trying to build. And then on the top right is my blank HTML file in the browser. So let's begin by creating the header of our page. So I'm going to add a class to this list. So we're creating a navigation list at the top of our page. So each of these list items will have a link inside. And I'm going to leave the href on the links blank, but you can add your own links if you want to do that. I'm just putting the text within the links so we can see them working. And above this, I'm going to add another link, and we'll give this a class, a CSS class of brand. So we'll have this title of our site. This will be our name at the very top left of the page. So opening up the style sheet now, I'm going to add some background color to our page. And now for the navigation links at the top of the page, I want to make those a white color for the text. We'll change this nav element to a UL, so an unordered list. So now that our links are white, we want to remove these bullet points from the list. And we'll also remove the margin and padding. And we can make these list elements inline block. So the display will be inline block. So they all run on the same line. And the menu, I'll float it to the right. And then for the brand link, we will make that white also. And we'll transform the text to uppercase. By default, I'm going to remove the text decoration from all links on the page. So that is the underline that we see underneath the links. So once we hover the links, we can also enable that text decoration just to have that hover effect. Now I'm going to add some padding to the header to space it away from the edge of the browser. For the navigation links, we can move those to create some space in between them. And we can do that using the padding. And you can see that they are spaced out more now. We can also do this from the link themselves. So the padding would make the link click area much bigger, which is better experience for the user. And I'm going to add a border right to the side of each of the list elements to create a divider. And we can space that divider out by using padding on the list. So we want to make this top area of the page white. So let's change the header background to the white. That means that our link colors will need to change. So we can see at the top there is this green space around our navigation. So in order to remove that, we can set the margin to 0 on the body of the page. So that fixes that problem. And I'm going to make the brand text a bold font. So we'll say font weight bold. So now let's move on to the body of the page. So we'll go back to our HTML file. And in here, I'm going to add a main element. So this will be our main section of our page. And we'll begin by adding a h1 tag. So this will be our title. And we'll have a paragraph tag. I will drop some lorem ipsum text into this. We'll have another lorem ipsum text paragraph. And just to contain this content, I'm going to wrap it in a div. We'll give that div a class. So this will allow us to style this content within our main section. We'll call this main left. So let's set a width to this main left section. And we'll set a color for the text. And now we can size the h1 tag. So give it a large font size and transform the text to uppercase. And we can move this content further down the page by adding a margin top on the main left class. And I will also do the same for the margin left. So now we can add some styling for our paragraph text. So set a font size. And we can remove the padding and margin on the header, the h1 tag. So I'm going to reduce the font size a little bit. So we are on a very small screen just to preview this, but just want to tidy it up a little bit. We can shorten the lorem ipsum text. Okay, so it looks a little bit better. So I'm going to create the footer content now. I will come back to this image in the middle of the page, but let's just get the markup together for our footer. So I'm going to create a list with 5 list elements. So the first list element will be a title, and the rest will be links. So again, I'm just leaving the href tag empty, but you can add a link to point this to. I'm just adding the text for the links so that we can see how it looks on screen. So now once we reload the page, we can see our links. So let's add a class to this unordered list in the footer. So we'll call this footer left nav. I'm going to copy this and just paste it. Call this one middle nav. And I will just update the descriptions of these links in this second navigation in the footer. So this one would be news, careers, privacy and terms links. And we also need to add our social links to the footer. So let's do that now. We'll create another list. This time we'll have 4 list items. We'll have a CSS class of social links on that list. So for each of these list items, I'm going to have a class. The class will tell us which icon to display. So I have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So we can copy this class name, social links. So first of all, let's set the background color on our footer. So this is going to be a black, solid black background. We can also add padding So we'll add the padding to the top, so 20 pixels on the top, and then the right, bottom, left, we'll leave those at 0. So padding happens clockwise. It starts at the top and then goes right, bottom, and then left values. So our social links, then we are going to float the list to the right. So I'll pull it to the right of the page. So now let's add some styles for the social links. So each of them we will be referencing individually, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. But before we do that, we will set the list style to none. So I'll remove the bullet points on our list, and we'll apply some styles to all of the list items. Say that they are inline block. And we'll set the image for this Facebook icon. That will not repeat, and we'll place it at 0 position from the left and 0 from the top, 0 pixels. And we will give this a width and height of 32 pixels. And you'll notice that the image is a little bit out of place, so we'll set the background size to contain, so that will ensure that the image does not go beyond the borders of this 32 pixels. So now let's copy this and create a new class for the next social icon. So what we can do here is we can move some of these styles to the bottom because they are being shared between all of these list items. So let's change the icons for each of these now. So only the image is being changed in each of these social icons. Everything else will remain the same. One thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the background image, and I will move the other values into full statements. We'll say background repeat, no repeat, background position, that will be 0, 0, and we'll move these down to the very bottom because they're going to be shared for each of these social icons. So we'll only be setting the background image. So now once we reload the page, everything is looking good for the social icons. They are fitting the 32 pixels correctly. So now let's have a look at the links at the bottom. Let's go back and grab the class name, footer left nav. So I will give a width to these lists. Let's try 200 pixels. So we'll display this as inline block. So both of these columns will sit side by side. And I'm going to make both of these columns share the same styles. Both are going to be 200 pixels wide and inline block. And I think we need to resize the page here to get this working properly. So I'm going to extend this out, and you can see that both of the columns are now sitting side by side. So now that we have the links in the footer aligned correctly, let's change the color. So we want to add a white text to the footer links. So here we can say color is white. And that changes the text at the top, the titles, but we'll also need to do the same for the link. But make those a gray color. And we'll need to remove the bullet point on these lists. So let's say list style, or you can also say list style type. Set that to none. That will remove the bullet point. And then we can control the line height. So we can space the text out in terms of vertical spacing by using line height. That is the height of the line of text. And then we will say that the first item in the list, so the first child, we can make this uppercase text. So This will change the top level of the text. So our titles will be uppercase on these footer lists. So now let's style the main center section of our page, the main body area. So I'm going to set a height on this just to make the page extend a little bit. So we have more space for this green color. And in fact, we can make the margin much better on the top of this text. Make our heading much bigger. And our body font size has turned out to 16 pixels. I think we can make it even bigger again, like 20 pixels. Now let's add our background image. So we have this shoe image. We'll put that in the center of the page. So this will be a background image. And we can say background repeat. We don't want that to repeat. And the position. So in position we can just say top right. Let's test this out. And it actually looks pretty good straight away, so we can just leave it like that. I'm just going to make this text wider. We do have a button to add here at the bottom. Let's compare that with my visual. So I'm going to add a link here and we'll style it up. So that would be our button. So I'm going to add a normal link here, but I'll add a class of btn or button. So let's add a border around this link. So 1 pixel solid, and we'll make it a white border. And we'll say the text transformation, let's make this uppercase. We'll add some padding. So 8 pixels on top and bottom and 12 on the left and right. We'll make this a white colored text. And we can make the font size much bigger, 24 pixels. Try this out. And we'll give it a margin top, 40 pixels. Now the margin isn't working because we need to change the display to block. Now the margin's working. And we'll center align the text. Text align center. We can add a radius to this, a border radius. You can see that the corners in my design are rounded. So a border radius will give us a little bit of a rounded corner. So we've got the rounded corner, and we can change the padding a little bit, I think, just to look a little bit better. I'm going to bring the radius, the border radius down to 6 pixels. And let's try to make this font weight bold. I think it looks quite good right now. So let's compare it with the design. And you can see in the design the edges of the page are straight. All of the content is lined up correctly. So let's tidy this up in our page. So a quick way I can do this is just to add a wrapper. So add a div, give it a class of inner. Copy this into this div. And I'll do the same at the top on the header. We'll also use the same div, just the same class name. Inner, move the content inside, and go to our style sheet. So I'm going to add a style for inner, and we'll set a max width on this of 1200 pixels. And we'll set a margin left auto, margin right auto. This will center on the page. Let's test this out. Okay, it's kind of working. We do see a bit of spacing here still, but I think this is because we have a margin on the left content. So we'll take off this margin left, and that lines up better now. So let's have a look at the footer. We'll do the same in the footer. I'm just using the same style for all of these sections on the page. So on the bottom, you can see that there's also a little bit of spacing here. So let's have a look at how we can fix this for the lists. So going to our footer lists. So what we can actually do for this is we can set this on the whole page. So the unordered list, we'll just set the margin to 0. And that helps the top, but I think the left must be the padding. So let's set the padding to 0 also. So by default, lists have a padding already set. So once we zero that, we get this nice alignment. So we got all of the things aligning here, very nice. We can increase the text size of our brand, the top left. So I'm going to give this a font size, 24 pixels. Okay, it's a bit better looking. And one thing to note over here on the right side is there is this border on the right, and that works nicely between the list items, but the very last one on the navigation list, it looks a little bit strange. So let's add a condition for that. Let's say the last child, so that's the last element in this list, the unordered list, and we'll zero that border right. At the bottom of the page, you will see that there is not much space here. So we can add some padding to our footer just to make this feel a little bit more spaced out. So add 50 pixels onto the bottom. And that looks much better, I think, just having the extra space. What we can do is make the links look a little bit better by changing the color once we hover them. So let's add a hover style for that. And while I'm doing that, I can add a font size for these links. Set that to 16 pixels. And for the hover color, I will make this a white. So this will light up white when we hover over it. It makes it very clear that this is a link. And I'm going to go back and remove this text decoration when we hover links. I think it looks much nicer without it. And we can also add a hover effect for the links at the top of the page in our header section. So we can set the color to be a solid black. So currently it's like a slightly lighter version of black, like a dark gray color. And I think I've got a typo here, so let me just fix this. I should have the A in here, so it should be list A hover. Okay, that's working. It's very subtle actually on this top nav, but I think it's okay. So one thing I want to do now is add a custom font into our page. So this will help to make the page look a lot better. So I'm just going to paste in the link to our font. So this goes into our styles.css, and we're going to display the Open Sans font. And I'm going to apply it to the body. So this will just go to all of the text on the page. You can select which elements you want to apply it to, but I'm just going to apply it to everything here. So you can see that now we have a different font on the page. It just looks a lot cleaner. One more thing we can do to make this better is have a hover effect on this button. So we can have a solid background on this button once we hover it. Make that a white background color. And since we made the background white, we will need to make the text green once we hover it. So we can get that same green from our background color. Let's try this out once more. And that's looking really nice right now. So we've got the text can be selected, we've got the hover effect on the button, and we have our background image, and we have the hover status on these footer links, and we've got the hover status on our top navigation. One thing we are missing here is links on our social icons. So I'm just going to add a link for each of these really quickly, and we will style them up afterwards. So these links will need to be full width and full height of our list elements, but we'll look at that in a few moments. So I'm just going to add blank links here. We don't want to include any text on the links, any text within those links, because it will display on the social icon, so we don't want to do that. We're using a background image already for the icons. So I'm just going to say that the links will display block, and we'll also need to say that they are width 100% and height 100%. Now once we hover them, you can see that the links are working. So there is a link there. When we look at the graphics I prepared in the beginning, you can see that the social icons are much larger in the graphic that I had created. So let's fix this in our current build. So an easy way for us to fix this is to simply change the width and height of the social links list element. So I'm going to double the size of this to 64 pixels. And you can see now that our images are indeed bigger. So these are filling the full width of the list element. So that's it for this build. We can see here that we've got the text and the title, we've got our brand, we've got our navigation, we've got these paragraph tags, we've got the button that has a hover effect, and we have our background image, and we've even got the footer, we've got the links that hover, change color when we hover them, we've got our titles on the top of these lists, and our social icons that have links. So I think we've done pretty well in this build. It's very simple, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed this and learned something along the way. If you have enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.